Good evening, everybody. Have you guys ever wondered why Jehovah Witnesses aren't allowed to post anything about their religion? Like, think about that. Do you know any other group that doesn't allow their church members to show their artwork, show their videos, or discuss their topics? You ever thought about that? I mean, if you're a Jehovah Witness, have you ever thought about why your church doesn't want to share any of its spiritual food with anybody unless it's under the direct supervision of elders? It's a really, really interesting thought, and I think it's a good thought experiment for someone who is a Jehovah Witness to think about. So you're not allowed to post, and anything you're posting you're supposed to take down unless you had permission. But have you ever known anyone who is ever had permission to share any of the spiritual food online on social media? No. Now, what's the reasoning for that? That's the real question. Well, it's all about control. Because if you post things and you give opinions, and your opinion isn't what it was supposed to be by the congregation or the organization standards, then you could interpret something. And since their stuff is so vague half the time about what they believe and don't believe, and witnesses do interpret things all the time technically incorrect, even though I would argue that they do that on purpose, but that's just my opinion. So, for an example, if you post an image from one of their, websites or whatever, and you talking about that, or here's a better example. Instead of an image, what if you recorded a talk by a governing body member, right, and then you posted it on your social media? Well, what's going to happen there? Then the people who are making comments about it can make comments about it. But if you've ever been on the Jehovah Witness webpage, there's nowhere to make comments. And if you do have a comment that you want to make, you have to go to the organization, go to the Kingdom Hall, set up a meeting with an elder, and then there will be several of them who will come and discuss whatever you want to talk about, and then they'll tell you why you're wrong. And if you choose to not listen to why you're wrong, then you get removed. That's it. That is the only reason why they do that, is because they don't want an outside influence questioning their authority. They're afraid of people having opinions, because it's very, very important for high control society and high control groups that people do not use critical thinking. And so if your information or whatever you're telling people is, God's word, and people can research it, review it, study it, analyze it, correct it, you don't want that to happen. So that's a really important reason why Jehovah Witnesses and organizations like that are really, really sticklers on not letting their material be shared by their members. And if you notice, anyone who is sharing the material is like a bad person because they told you not to do it. And only an apostate would do that. And they're doing it just to make them look bad. Now, my argument is, how could somebody make you look bad by paying attention to what you said? Because if it looks bad, it's not the person's fault that posted it. It's the person who created it. So if I went and said some terrible, awful thing about, let's say, a group of people, and then I said that no one's allowed to share that information and it needs to be quiet within my group of friends, and then somebody posts it out there and I go around and saying, well, it's not my fault I said this awful, terrible thing, they weren't supposed to share it. But yet I have a web page that says these things that's public. So it's things like that make no sense at all, that really, I don't know, it really makes me think, like, why do you do this? Like, if you're a religious organization, right, and you're preaching spiritual food that's going to save somebody's life or eternal life, I would think that no matter who is sharing it, would be the greatest benefit to you. Because if it's God's mouth saying these things, then as soon as people hear it, because of God's brilliance, they would be able to understand exactly what they need to do, and they would know it's God. But if it's not God, right, and it's something else, or it's non-existent, then it can be interpreted many different ways, and it would be very confusing, and there would obviously be problems. So that would be my issue with that. I just got to think that doesn't really make a lot of sense, because if you are wanting people to know your truth, and people are sharing your truth, like your little governing body puppets, why are you upset? Why do you even care? You shouldn't, because if they're saying what they're supposed to say, then you shouldn't be embarrassed. Now, when you're embarrassed of what you believe, and you don't want people to talk about what you believe, well, then that's your problem, in my opinion. Because if you believe something that you're ashamed of or embarrassed of or you need to hide, well, I think the problem is probably more you than someone else. So why is your embarrassment of your own religion someone else's fault? I mean, do you ever think about that? I mean, if you're a witness, right, an actual believing witness, and you think that you can, I don't know, have a counter argument to this, I'd really want to know what that is. I mean, if you are a believing Jehovah Witness and you happen to see this and you want to defend this ideology, I would be curious on your thought process and why I'm incorrect and why you are, and that hiding spiritual food is what you should be doing. I'm just curious.